Well, in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, thousands of demonstrators are blockading government buildings, demanding the resignation of the government. The protests follow President Viktor Yanukovych's refusal to sign a deal on closer ties with the EU. Live now to our Europe editor, Matt Fry in Kiev. Matt.
Well, John, from the balmy warmth of Bangkok to the freezing cold of Kiev. And what you see behind me in Independence Square is the endurance of tens of thousands of protesters who've decided to brave the cold for another night of demonstrations against the government. But here's the difference. In Thailand, the protests are entirely internal. It's about the government there. This is a chessboard in a geopolitical chess game involving the EU and Russia. And that makes the stakes here so much higher. And that also makes the game of brinkmanship played by President Yanukovych extremely dangerous. Ukraine's winter of discontent has only just begun. Today, protesters were back on the streets of Kiev. Their intention to paralyze government by blockading it. Thousands of demonstrators marched on the seats of executive power at the Cabinet of Ministers headquarters. We have to block entire streets, the streets behind us also, to make sure that not even one official will get to their office, this protester shouted. So far it seems to have worked. The Ukrainian government is paralyzed, between protesters calling for revolution and President Putin of Russia threatening at least economic revenge if Ukraine rekindles its flirtation with the EU. It's not the first time that Ukraine, a nation of 45 million souls, finds itself in this tug-of-war between Eastern and Western Europe. 9 years ago, the Orange Revolution led to a rerun of suspect elections and Mr. Yanukovych's ouster from office. He seems determined not to repeat that experience. The question is whether he has overplayed his hand by giving in to Russian demands. The new generation of protesters, empowered by the memories and failed promises of the Orange Revolution, and the organizational tool of the internet, are equally determined not to give in. For them, this battle is about the soul of their nation. They were outraged by the government's 11th hour U-turn against an agreement with the EU, which would have been an essential milestone towards full EU membership. The toxic situation here was further inflamed by the heavy and brutal hand of the police. The riot police used tear gas, baton charges and stun grenades. The protesters responded with rocks. The result, dozens of injured on both sides, and a foretaste of things to come in a crisis with no elegant or obvious solution. Long live Ukraine, the protesters shouted. But which Ukraine? This sprawling country, which borders Poland in the west and Russia in the east, is almost equally divided between those who seek a stronger embrace from Moscow and those who desire it from Brussels. For these protesters, it is a matter of freedom. For Russia, pride. And for Brussels, principle. A geopolitical love triangle with implications well beyond Kiev's Independence Square. And not much love lost between the opposition and the president, who, by the way, declared today that he was still going on a state trip to China tomorrow, but will stop off to see Vladimir Putin, his patron, in Moscow on the way back. I just spoke a few minutes ago to one of the leading lights of the opposition here, who said these protests will last as long as it takes for the government to step down and for there to be a snap election announced by Parliament. So these people here aren't going anywhere fast. Back to you, John.